This video has been brought to you by CyberGhost VPN. More about them later in this video. Welcome back to Biographics. I'm your host, Cosmic Horror Madman Eric Malachite, and today's bite-sized bio is authored by Radu Alexander, who tells me he does not have any socials to offer. However, give him a shout out in the comments for this punchy script and let us know who your favorite Roman athlete is. And if you're curious about my cosmic horror work, check out the links in the description. There's a free sci-fi horror ebook there for you. With that said, let's say a prayer to our dear 8 pounds, 6 ounces, newborn infant Jesus, don't even know a word yet, and get off to the races. According to the most recent ranking we can find, Michael Jordan is the highest paid athlete of all time, with career earnings totaling $3.7 billion, adjusted for inflation, of course. And if you're curious, the top 5 comprises Tiger Woods at number 2, followed by Cristiano Ronaldo, Arnold Palmer, and LeBron James. In total, these 5 sportsmen earned around $12 billion. But what if there was one athlete from ancient times who earned more than all of them put together? That is the notion put forward by a professor from the University of Pennsylvania who calculated that an illiterate Roman charioteer named Gaius Appulius Diocles won over the course of his career 35,863,120 sesterces in prize money. This would have been enough to fund the entire Roman army at the height of its power for over 2 months, or to provide grain for all of Rome for a whole year. In modern currency, that is estimated to be in the neighborhood of $15 billion, which begs the question, was Gaius Appulius Diocles the richest athlete of all time? Before we get started on Diocles, let's have a quick word about chariot racing as a whole. Although nowadays, we always picture the ancient Romans going to see gladiator fights for a bit of weekend entertainment, chariot racing was by far the most popular public game in Rome. Known as ludi, these games were often held as part of religious festivals and other celebrations and became an integral part of Roman society ever since the city's birth. According to legend, just a few months after Romulus founded Rome, he used chariot races and other games to entice the nearby Sabines to attend their festivals and enact the rape of the Sabine women. Yes, you heard that right, where hundreds of maidens were kidnapped by the Romans with the intent to marry them and unite their two peoples, which is just a hell of a thing to hear, I'm sure. Chariot racing went on to hold a place of prestige during the kingdom period of Rome, the Roman Republic, and the glory days of the empire, surviving the fall of the Western Roman Empire as Constantinople became the new hotbed for charioteering. During this time, the greatest charioteers were popular idols in Rome, similar to the athletes of today. They earned the favor of senators and emperors, and the most successful racers made fortunes. The poet Juvenal wrote how one racer named Lacerta could make 100 times more money than a lawyer, while another named Scorpus was so rich that he had gilded busts of himself erected all over the city. Now that is swagger. With money and prestige also came great fame, and chariot racers, who were called aurige, had some incredibly dedicated supporters. Pliny wrote of one grieving fan who was so devastated by the death of his favorite racer that he threw himself on top of the funeral pyre so that they could burn together. That's dedication. Others were willing to risk prison or even execution for using sorcery against opposing drivers to help out their favorites. Cursed tablets were found where their bearers prayed for certain aurige to get tripped, maimed, or killed during the races. In fact, the drivers themselves were sometimes accused of using magic to tip the scales in their favor. Historian Ammianus mentions 3 instances between 364 and 372 AD where charioteers were prosecuted for magic practices in Rome. One was beheaded, the second was burned at the stake, and the third was acquitted, which is just silly. Everyone knows the right way to test for a witch is to see if she floats like wood, because witches are made of wood.
A witch! A witch!
Racers were divided into 4 teams, the reds, the whites, the blues, and the greens. Well, Domitian tried adding 2 more, but the idea was dropped once he died. As you might expect, each driver wore a uniform in the color of his team. much like Starfleet officers. There were no jumbotrons back in ancient Rome, so people needed a way to tell them apart. Each team was associated with certain neighborhoods, even certain classes at various points throughout history, and rivalries developed between them in the same way that it happens with football teams in modern times. And just like today's hooligans, Roman fans sometimes took things way too far. Riots breaking out over the races was not unheard of. Worst of all were probably the Nika riots in 532 AD in Constantinople. They lasted for a week, killed tens of thousands of people, and left almost half the city in ruins. In other words, the Romans took their chariot racing very seriously. If you're like me, you probably spend a lot of time writing in cafes. It might sound cliche, but it's one of the best environments to get a manuscript done. But using someone else's Wi-Fi can be a security nightmare. Data breaches and malware infections are a lot more common than you might think. You could be a button press away from losing all of your data, or worse, your identity itself. With CyberGhost VPN, you can finally put your mind at ease and shield your identity. It's super easy to get started too, as CyberGhost is one of the most beginner-friendly VPNs on the market, and their customer service is top-notch. It's easy to see why more than 19,000 users have given them an excellent rating on Trustpilot, and more than 38 million users are actively using their service. How does it work? CyberGhost transmits your data through a secured encrypted tunnel, giving you a high level of online anonymity and military-grade security. Step up your cybersecurity without falling behind in speed or responsiveness, and overcome blocked online libraries of over 40 streaming services like Netflix and Amazon Prime. On a personal note, I've tried other VPNs, and I've never been able to get TV shows not available in the US using them. But with CyberGhost, I was able to access UK Netflix and start streaming It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia with zero headaches. Use one subscription to protect and enjoy online freedom without restrictions on up to 7 devices. CyberGhost VPN service ticks virtually every single box you can imagine, and it's compatible with most operating systems, including Windows, Mac OS, Linux, iOS, Android, Smart TV, and even gaming consoles. It's simply one of the best VPN service providers. Click on the link in the description to get this amazing offer that is available only for our subscribers. So act quickly. Click the link in the description and use this special discount CyberGhost VPN has provided just for our channel users to protect your data. It's a 45-day money-back guarantee and 24/7 customer support, so everything is risk-free. Let's travel back in time about 1900 years to the age of the early Roman Empire during the reign of Hadrian. You are a pleb, aka a commoner, which means that life probably doesn't offer you too many pleasures. But none of that matters at the moment because today is race day. Racing stadiums existed throughout the empire, but if you lived in Rome, you got to see the grandest one of all, the Circus Maximus, which had existed in the city in one form or another ever since the beginning of the Roman kingdom. It was said that after being renovated by Julius Caesar, the Circus Maximus could hold up to 150,000 people. Still, if you wanted to get a good seat, your best chances were to camp out the night before, unless you were rich, of course. The senatorial class had exclusive access to the best seats in the house, which were also shaded so they didn't have to sit in the sun all day like the rest of the rabble. After them came the equestrian order, Rome's second class, and they too had reserved seating, just not as good as the senators. The only other group of people who had their own special seats at the games were the Vestal Virgins. But alas, you are neither senator nor virgin, we're assuming. So you have to settle for whatever seat you can find. Ideally, you'd want one in a group of people who support the same team you do. This drastically decreases the chances of getting stabbed during or after the race. That's important. But you're not worried about that today, because you get to see one of the greatest drivers in history, Gaius Appulius Diocles. Born in the Roman province of Lusitania in 104 AD, Gaius Appulius Diocles began his racing career at age 18, driving for the white team. He wasn't some kind of prodigy though, and in fact it took him 2 years before he gained his first victory. Just like modern athletes, Aurigae could become free agents and change teams. After 6 years of racing with the whites, Diocles switched to the greens. Just like modern athletes, Aurigae could become free agents and change teams, much like Ricky Bobby. After 6 years of racing with the whites, Diocles switched to the greens. However, he only spent 3 years there before announcing that he was taking his talents to the red team, where he spent the next 15 years of his life before retiring at the age of 42. During his career, Diocles took part in 4,257 races and won 1,462 of them. On average, that's about 175 races per year, and if that sounds like a lot, just remember that some emperors sponsored over 20 races per day to keep the population happy and distracted from all the shenanigans they were doing behind the curtain. Or as Juvenal perfectly put it, give them bread and circuses and they will never revolt. His longevity alone is a trait that puts Diocles a step above his competitors. Make no mistake about it, chariot racing was an incredibly dangerous sport, mostly on purpose. Although the Romans were inspired by the Greeks, they decided that the Greek way just didn't fulfill your average Roman's daily quota for violence, so they tweaked the rules just a tiny bit. For example, in the center of the oval stadiums, there was a long and narrow strip called a spina that the charioteers raced around. The spina was adorned with statues, columns, obelisks, and other accessories, plus a couple of large heavy poles at each end called the metai. These poles represented the most dangerous section of the track because it was where races were won and lives were lost. It was a high-risk, high-reward situation where the drivers truly showed off their skill. Get the corners right and gain a significant lead. Get them wrong and die in a thunderous crash. Both outcomes were fine with the public in attendance since many of them came to the stadium in the hopes of witnessing a naufragie, or a shipwreck, meaning a smashed chariot. The drivers, their teams, and their sponsors all knew this, which is why crashes were not only expected but almost encouraged. It wasn't unheard of for Auriga from the same faction to gang up on an opponent during a race and force him into the spina. Because, as a great man once said, if you ain't first, you're last. If that wasn't dangerous enough, there was another difference between Greek and Roman chariot racing. The Greeks held the reins to the horses in their hands. That way, if they were going to crash, they could let go and maybe have a chance of surviving if the gods were smiling upon them that day. The Romans, on the other hand, said, "Hold my beer," and decided to tie the reins around their waists. That way, even if they survived the crash, they would still get dragged around by the horses until they became meat crayons. Don't Google that. This is why Roman drivers carried a curved knife as part of their equipment, so they could cut the reins. But of course, nobody would be too upset if they used it to give an opponent a little friendly poke. With all of that going on, it's a small miracle that Diocles not only made it into his 40s in a sport where many competitors died in their 20s, but that he actually got to enjoy retirement. Everything we know about Diocles comes from 2 commemorative inscriptions done in his honor, and although they are light on the biographical details, they are quite thorough when it comes to his racing accolades. So here are Diocles' stats straight from the source. His wins: drove a 4-horse chariot for 24 years. He started 4,257 races, won 1,462. He won the first race of the day 110 times. In races for single 4-horse chariots, he won 1,064 times, and in this, he took the largest purse 92 times. He won the 30,000 sesterces prize 32 times, 3 of them in a 6-horse chariot, the 40,000 sesterces prize 28 times, twice in a 6-horse chariot, the 50,000 prize 28 times, 1 in a 6-horse chariot, the 60,000 sesterces prize 3 times. In races for pairs of 4-horse chariots, he won 347 times, and won 15,000 4 times in a 3-horse chariot. In races for 3-horse chariots, he won 51 times. He gained honors 1,000 times. He was second 861 times, third 576, fourth with 1,000 sesterces once, and took no prize 1,351 times. He won jointly with a Charioteer from the Blues 10 times, with one from the Whites 91, and shared the 20,000 purse twice. His total winnings were 35,863,120 sesterces. He also won 1,000 sesterces in a 2-horse chariot, jointly with a white Charioteer once and with a green twice. He won while leading from the gate 850 times, coming from behind Giggity 67 after being passed 36 in different ways 42, and at the finishing line 502. He won against the Greens 216 times, against the Blues 205, and against the Whites 81 times. 9 horses had 100 wins with him, and 1 had 200. So was Diocles the richest athlete of all time? Well, the truth is we can't really say, at least not with absolute certainty, but it's very unlikely. We have no idea what his social status was. Was he a slave or a criminal? Or was he a free Roman who decided to take up chariot racing even though this was considered a taboo profession for a citizen? Each scenario would have impacted how much money he actually got to take home. However, if he truly was a celebrated aurige in his own time, it wouldn't be surprising if he got to negotiate higher and higher earnings for himself throughout his career. As to what happened to Diocles after he hung up his racing boots, we don't know, since the inscriptions with his information were made during his lifetime and they didn't bother to update them later. All we know is that in 146 AD, the 42-year-old Diocles retired in the city of Praenesta, a short distance from Rome. We assume that he got to enjoy the spoils of his labor while waiting for Nike to offer him a sandal sponsorship. Future Eric here before we end the video. Don't forget to click on the description link to get the special discount CyberGhost VPN is granting to our viewers. This application will protect your data while you browse and give you full access to all blocked content on the internet for $2.03 a month. It's totally risk-free, so check it out. Link is in the description. I hope you learned something new today, and if you did, be sure to give thanks in the comments to Radu Alexander for another excellent script, and be sure to keep it tuned here to Biographics for more videos like this. I'm Eric Malachite, and I'll see you next time, Space Cowboy.
It's making me a little itchy.
Well, what do you say we get thrown out of an Applebee's?